Doc Ryan, Expedition 44. Today we are going to look at a few more memes. So the first one we've got is Evangelicals. Is this the end times? Literally anything that happens in the Middle East. So this is good. Matt, tell us a little bit about it.
So there's a view of the book of Revelation and end times, which sees everything as a future prophecy, per se, of things, and it takes the genre at face value. Revelation was an apocalypse, which used symbols to describe things. So a lot of people interpret the book of Revelation in a way that there's all these future things that revolve in the Middle East that are going to happen. They come to the end of the world.
Very literal.
So people read the newspaper and then read that newspaper back into the Bible.
I remember when I was a kid, every time the moon got blood red, I would think God was coming back that night. I'd sit there praying at night, And so people do that all the time with the book of Revelation, and it seems like every few years you kind of get people, talking about numerology and building on this. Last one was Christ is coming back. I think it was like September 11th, maybe 2017 or something like that. And so people tend to do that.
Yeah. So in the meme here, it's kind of poking fun at the people who are a bit fanatical with that view.
No one knows the time or the place. People just need to relax sometimes. So. All right. I asked God for a bike, but I know He doesn't work that way. So I stole a bike and asked for forgiveness. What does it mean? Describe it.
So it's talking about when we pray and ask God for stuff that He doesn't always give us what we want, and sometimes that's true. It's more about, is your will aligned with God's will? So the person's basically saying, I want it anyway, so I stole it, and I know that no matter what I do, God will forgive me.
Yeah, and people kind of live in this meistic type of thought pattern where they get this idea that theologically, like, God is sitting on the edge of the table waiting for their prayers to come in, and it's going to be this back and forth thing of getting the best for the person. And it doesn't really work that way.
No.
But it's funny.
It is.
And I think a lot of times it's too true that people kind of don't really care how the nature of God works. They just want to work it in within what they want.
Yeah, they ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So we should be seeking God in every step of the way and seeing where He wants to direct us instead of doing what we want and then saying, oh, well, that wasn't on your path, so please forgive me.
Right. And then we also see a little bit, it's the same notion where people are kind of, bending the scriptures a little bit to say what they want to say all the time. All right, so for the next one, we've got a couple Joel ones, and this one says, the moral of Noah's Ark, God wants you to have a yacht.
All right, that's pretty funny.
That's pretty funny. Why is it funny?
Because the moral of the story is rather humanity's gotten really evil and God is resetting creation.
Yeah, like destroy everything, and it's kind of like a tongue in the cheek of like, prosperity. Jesus was really into like religious bigotry with the Pharisees and things like that. And I actually like Joel. I think that like he's trying to do a good job with what he's got. But there's a lot of like,
we talk about the whole prosperity thing a lot in our Job class. And,
should righteousness lead to prosperity? Was that in the Old Testament? Is it in the New Testament? Does the Bible teach that?
Yeah.
What about this one? It says hermeneutics. Never heard of him.
All right, so hermeneutics is a fancy name of the study of biblical interpretation. So it's a poke at Joel Osteen saying that he has bad biblical interpretation. It's really, a lot of people say that because of what we were talking about, the prosperity stuff. And it's really, bad hermeneutics, bad theology. People kind of say those two things, kind of intermixing them. But it is a little bit different, too. But they kind of flush out to be the same thing. So it's you're using the Bible to kind of say what you want, like we were implying a couple minutes ago, and not necessarily taking particularly the whole scope of a biblical message, and definitely not within one chapter or two chapters. They kind of just, preach to a certain point that they're trying to use to make what they want to say. Yeah, there's an overarching narrative in the Bible, and everything needs to be interpreted within that narrative.
Yeah, well said. Now, on that note, we also have this next one, which says, hey, everyone that keeps quoting me, did you know that I'm a 5-point Calvinist? Who is this picture?
That's Charles Spurgeon.
Tell me a little bit about Spurgeon and why this is funny saying that.
Well, Spurgeon wrote a ton, and he was a really, really good preacher.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you take a lot of his early stuff and compare it to his late stuff, they don't line up.
No,
because
not
he
at all.
had a huge theological turn toward the end of his life and became a 5-point Calvinist, kind of similar to Augustine, who was very free will almost his entire life until the Pelagius controversy came up, and then he changed everything and almost kind of became the father of what's Calvinism now, introducing some Manichaeanism and stuff into the church.
So what's interesting about this is I hear people quote both of those people all the time, and they'll quote one from kind of their early life, more free will, and then 2 weeks later you'll hear a sermon where they'll quote something else, and the two don't really agree.
Yeah.
And you kind of look at that, and I mean, people just think these big names of old like that, everything they said was good, but the fact of the matter is a lot of times they were kind of working this out on their own and, like you said, kind of changed their viewpoint from one to the other. So when I hear these quotes, I think, well, which one are you? Which one do you agree with? Where do you land here?
Yeah, you can pull out anything from Spurgeon or even Augustine and support kind of either side of the soteriology debates that are going on now between Calvinism and non-Calvinism or Arminianism, traditionalism, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. And there's some people on either side of the fence that almost refuse to quote either one of those because it gets very complicated.
It does.
All right, next, we kind of got a Willy Wonka one go on here. It says, so Jeremiah 29:11 is all about you. And then underneath it says, remind me again about your time in the Babylonian exile.
All right, so this is a verse that's thrown out quite a bit to say, hey, God's got this awesome plan for your life. It's, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. It's plans to prosper you, to give you a future. But Ryan, what's the context of it?
Well, some people say that it's the most misquoted verse in the entire Bible.
Yep.
And I mean, I have been in the room when, a pastor is saying it in the sermon and the person I'm sitting next to starts, visibly, rolling their eyes, you got to be kidding me, because it does seem to be taken out of context a lot. So the context is the Babylonian exile, and I think most of people that we talk to, we live in this great westernized American culture where we all live like kings, and we really don't know what suffering looks like, especially for the gospel. And so this Babylonian exile, I mean, people are pretty much in a life where everything is removed from them. They're marched from one place to the other. They're treated as slaves at some point. I mean, it's kind of the worst thing that you can possibly imagine. And it's this verse kind of saying, despite being crushed, despite being in the lowest place ever, you can't foresee how you can be out of here, that God is going to deliver the Israelites from this, that there's a plan for them. And people take this and they kind of insert their name in it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit problematic. I believe that, God has plans for us. He wants us to live according to His will, and God directs and chooses people to do certain things for Him. So, I believe God does have plans, but using this particular verse in a context of that is not always maybe the best hermeneutical choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of saying words that are true. We see some of these throughout the rest of the Bible, but saying that this was kind of very much applied to my life in the way that it is, and you haven't really lived through that. In fact, would God laugh at you for applying that to your life at this point? All right, and since Valentine's Day is right around the corner, we're going to finish with some Theology Valentines memes. So the first one says, confession, I love you, signed Augustine.
This is pretty funny. Augustine's one of his biggest works is Augustine's Confessions. So, it's playing off of that writing, but his confession is, I love you.
I love you. Next one, my heart is held captive by you. Here I stand, I can do no other. Martin Luther.
Martin Luther, one of the kind of big guys from the Reformation. His big thing was standing on the Word of God. Here I stand, I can do no other is one of his most famous lines. So but he take a little turn on that. My heart is held captive. Here I stand, I can do no other. It's
kind of funny putting these into love note languages as if it's a kindergartner giving it one from one kindergartner to the other kindergartner.
In your shoebox.
It's really tongue-in-cheek because, these guys were these were the major works of their lives. They poured into them, and it's kind of funny that you're just saying, I'm going to give this, pass it around, whatever. The next one says, you're irresistible, signed John Calvin.
All right, so one of Calvin's doctrines was irresistible grace.
What does that mean?
So irresistible grace was when God chooses someone to be saved, that his drawing power is irresistible to the person that he's drawing.
And it's funny in the context of a Valentine, is it like you were meant to be forever and, soulmates and, whatever else. Next one says, I choose you, Jacobus Arminius.
All right, so Jacob Arminius was kind of the father of Arminianism, which is more it's similar to Calvinism, but emphasizes more free will and prevenient grace. So his thing is that God gives us the ability to choose Him. So
in the free will. So now you're talking little kindergartner has all these choices, and I can choose anything.
I can choose anyone to give this Valentine.
I choose you.
I choose you.
That's funny. All right, we've got another one. I feel all of the four loves for you, C.S. Lewis.
All right, so C.S. Lewis has some major work on the different words for love in Greek.
Yep.
And so, yeah, this is playing...
Kind of breaks them all apart and everything. And we talk about this, like the discussion of love languages kind of breaks out from that and everything. And almost every time I've heard a sermon on love, it's influenced by the work of C.S. Lewis. And so it's kind of funny of how, you would kind of attribute going off the deep end of doing whatever you can to aspire to the way somebody wants to receive your love. And so that's what it talks about. And they're all funny, and it's kind of, talking about how God reveres his love to us, and a lot of times we kind of cheapen that.
Yeah.
And so this is a look of just tongue-in-cheek of cheapening the theology of what God has done for us. So, hope you enjoyed this session. Tune in next time. May God bless you and keep you.